Okay, thank you and welcome to our Monday, March 28th, 9 o'clock strategic planning meeting. Please let the record reflect that we have Commissioner Kearns and Commissioner Cuny are here. I anticipate Commissioner French joining and we'll note that when he does. Our executive management team is here. And we are going to start off today with a presentation from Chad Coles on the Old Corral and Spokane Valley Properties update.
Good morning, Commissioners. I have a really brief slideshow that you guys have already seen. But starting off with the Shirley property, this is revisiting a couple of property sales that we brought to you last week and got our act together a little bit more and bringing them back with some more details. This Shirley property is right next to Jennifer Auto Sales, if you've heard the commercials, out in Spokane Valley, city of Spokane Valley, right off Sprague, where the Appleway Trail comes into Sprague, as you can see there. Last week, there was some concern that we have a full price offer for the parcel, and there was some concern that the offer included the county paying real estate fees. After reviewing the purchase and sale agreement a little more closely, we found that we are not required by that offer to pay the real estate fees. The purchaser will pay those as described in the offer. So with that, unless there's any questions, I still recommend we take the full price offer for this parcel.
Okay. Any questions, Commissioner Kearns? I see you unmuted.
So what was the confusion? So were they asking us to pay it or not then?
They were not.
They
was
were not.
initiated of the purchase and sale agreement.
Okay, so it was just misunderstanding. Then.
Yes.
Okay. I'm fine with selling it then.
So the second one slide in.
I'm fine with moving forward with it as well.
Oh, thank you, Commissioner. We're sharing again. So we had the one other. Oh, this is another view of the property, and another view of the property. So the other sale in question was the sale of 2 acres of the Old Corral property. If the board recalls, this is the property that we had up for sale originally and sold to a developer who is now out there, as I understand it, starting to move dirt on a proposal that the board accepted a few years ago. In their review of the site, they requested to add this additional 2 acres outlined in red. Is the board's familiar with where the Old Corral property is, are you? Okay, I won't go into that. So this 2 acres is unneeded for the county shop that's there to the south between the red outline and the ball fields. And so we entered into a negotiation with them. The question came up last time is, do we have an appraisal, and is the price reasonable in terms of time going by since the appraisal? The appraisal we have was a year old. And so I asked our right-of-way agent, who does most of our appraisals, and values of opinions. He's not an appraiser, but I asked him to go and review the site in light of the steepness of the ground and give us an opinion as to whether the price offered, which was $91,800 for the 2 acres, to give us an opinion as to whether that was a reasonable offer. And so he went out and did that, and did a Scott Sauvé is our agent that does all of those valuations, and he came back with comparables in the area of $2.8 to $3.03 per square, or I'm sorry, $0.28 to $3.03 per square foot. And this offer is right in the 96 cents per square foot. So it is in that range, albeit below the median of that appraisal. But in reviewing the site, he went out and looked at it, and considering the location, steepness, and access limitations, he did recommend that the value offered was reasonable. Any questions?
Thank you. So I think last time you talked, I thought the appraisal was like 4 years old. So it's only a year old?
It's only a year old. That's my understanding.
Okay. Then, I mean, I guess, you know, with that, I mean, I think that would be reasonable, and I would take your recommendation. I see Commissioner Green's head nodding.
It's all good. Let's get that property sold, Chad.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, commissioners. Well, we have that on the agenda. I see Scott's hands up.
Scott?
Okay, another question, commissioners, for Chad. What was the determination on the antenna site?
Oh, thank you for bringing that up. We reviewed that with Shrek, and they do not have any need for the site. So that was the last question. Sorry, I forgot that piece. So with that, we have it on the agenda. So if the board agrees, then we'll just leave it there and move forward with the sale of those two properties.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda, we have Jeff McMorris, and I'm sure Arian Schmidt, the two of them, to speak about ARP planning.
Thank you, Commissioner Cooney. Erin will go through 4 documents. She's the creator of the documents. We have 2 of our first American Rescue Plan RFPs. We just need a kind of a head nod from the commissioners that we're going the right direction. It does not require a formal vote before posting. So Erin will go through it's 2.25, addressing educational disparities RFP, and then the 5.11, which is the drinking water transmission and distribution RFP. After those, there'll be 2 more documents. One is just the sole source form, which is really the county's form with a little bit of ARP language added. And then we do have 1 project that we believe fits a sole source designation for ARP funds. That comes under 5.6 clean water, stormwater. And that one will actually be in a resolution form. We're looking for feedback on that to have it on consent for tomorrow if the commissioners approve. So with that, I will hand it over to Arian.
Good morning, commissioners. Ron, would you please put one of the 2 draft, either education or water scope on screen? Thank you. So we have pulled out for you the scope component of the RFP that will be released later this week related to the ARP expenditure category 2.5, which is addressing educational disparities for academic, emotional, and social services. What we're showing you today is the scope component of that will be put into the template that contains standard Spokane County procurement, but we wanted to make sure you were aware of the items that we will be releasing for respondents. Ron, if you could scroll down. The criteria and scoring will focus primarily on the implementation plan model firms throughout the community would like to use in order to address this particular ARP category, as well as unique needs in Spokane County for that. We want to know the experience of the firm itself, the persons that will be involved, and distinct deliverables. Some of these deliverables are required by the federal government as a part of this category, particularly related to disparities and vulnerable populations, and some are related to particular components for educational criteria successes that will be part of those outcome reports. Ron, next page, please. Go ahead and scroll up a little bit more. Oh, down. One particular component of this is for firms that are interested in this type of ARP funding to show that they are actively looking at other matching funds in other areas, whether it be public or private sectors, to go alongside this funding, because it is intended to be a Spokane County-wide solution that will involve multiple different entities and impacts. The particular implementation plan components do need to include the items below. Ron, go ahead and scroll up, please. Number 1 will be an asset inventory related to the population served. This will really help the commissioners as part of not only this allocation, but other decision points so that you know what's out there. Ron, I think we need to go down to the next page. There we go. Additionally, we will want to make sure that this particular firm has memorandums of understanding that might be required to fully implement the funding given, to be able to ensure that outcome-based metrics are included in not only the partner contracts, but also for the federal ARP reimbursements for this particular contract. We want to make sure that any firm that is responding does submit a financial pro forma for how they will use the funding for the full duration of time, or 5 years, which ends in December 31st, 2026, and ongoing actuals of how the spending aligns with what was intended. The first year, instead of outcome metrics, we would like for the firm to show baselines. Go ahead and scroll down. I think we're at the last page, Ron. Very good. So once again, the funding component really is their ARP request, and then a show of how other funds, both public and private, are being used to augment this for a holistic solution. One particular item, and Ron, I want to make sure you have the right version. There should be a component down there at the bottom. Looks like an incorrect version was given, that we do have at the, go ahead and scroll back up, Ron, a asterisk next to the public funds, because we do want to ensure that, particularly related to the city of Spokane, there are allocated funds that come from that district. If for some reason that does not occur, we will request, using guidelines for other funding sources like TRAP, that this particular ARP funding will be used for cities and unincorporated area. Lot of information, but I wanted to make sure, as our first time out the door, this particular RFP content shows to you the type of approach that we would like to do in going out to firms. Are there any questions? All right, Ron, next for the water category.
Yeah, Arian, I just want to say, yeah, it looks good to me. So thank you for, I know you guys have been working hard trying to get these put together, these first couple to get out the door. So just appreciate all the work and effort that you have in on it. So thank you.
Our pleasure, our pleasure. We appreciate everyone working with us, because this has been our first couple that is going out the door. Once again, this is the pullout of the scope component of the RFP document. Note that this particular RFP will have other pieces because it is a public works document. I've noted it in the screenshot up there that's related to construction and public works bids. I decided not to put it in here because it adds 30+ pages. So note that this will follow standard contracting for public works. Go ahead and scroll down. So this particular one is really wanting to ensure that we use some of our ARP funding for allowable areas for water infrastructure projects. And we want to ensure that the firms responding, go ahead and scroll up, Ron, are not only allowed to provide other direction. scroll down, there you go, are not only allowed to provide, but they also have projects that are ready to go. There are primarily a number of items where they have water rights. They've already done design documents. They have permits ready to go, construction package ready to go. And most importantly, go ahead and that the ARP request is no more than 35% of the total budget, because we really want to be an augment to complete a project rather than the wholesale itself. Go ahead and scroll down, Ron. And once again, these are some other examples of funding source that we would like to see as matches that ARP funding requests will not exceed more than 35% of. Once again, we're really excited that this will be the first of many water and infrastructure projects. And this is one that we would like to have one that's all ready to go and just needs that last bit to cross the finish line for the constituents of whatever area that they would like to request. Any questions? All right, Ron, would you please bring up the ARP sole source for West Terrace form, please?
Which one is it?
That would be it. Yes.
No, this is the resolution.
Oh, sorry. Yep. So this will be the resolution. Sorry. It would be the Word document that said sole source on the top.
Pull it up.
We also have Matt Zokor that will be listening in if after we explain the form, there's any particular questions about the role of Public Works. He's happy to answer those from a Public Works perspective. And just so you know, we'll show you this form and we will show you it as a version that is meant for a sole source allocation for which we are requesting your consent tomorrow. At the same time, this will give you a visual on what the ARP form itself looks like. And it really is the standard Spokane County procurement sole source form with just a few branding, for lack of a better word, components to make sure that it's very clear to everyone that this is utilizing ARP funds. The eligibility, once again, is a coding to code for sole source. And then we added one more additional criteria to ensure that the sole source request also meets what's allowable by the US Treasury. We included the link because the Treasury sometimes makes changes and we want to make sure as this goes forward that it includes any updated information. This particular project in the West Terrace area, for which I think you are familiar for, but Ron, if you want to go ahead and flip over to the map.
Arian, before we leave this,
Yes.
It says estimated total cost is like $500,000. I thought it was 5.5.
So the component I received on the sole source part, and actually if Chad or Matt want to jump in here, I'm just using what I received from Public Works. So if that needs to update.
Yeah, I'm not sure where the 500, I assume that's just the design portion.
Okay.
Commissioner, you're correct that the entire project's well above that.
Okay.
Okay, so is that the correct number for this point, or does it need to be the larger amount?
It will need to be the larger amount. I think
There's a
that
5 missing.
yeah, so we'll go ahead and update that before it tomorrow to 5.5 million to include the entire amount. As Chad said, this may have been just the design portion and I was not aware of that. So thank you for that great catch. I have that noted. Thank you, Chad. Ron, if you want to scroll down, we'll just go through the criteria. These are the standard questions about why this particular entity or request can only be provided by an entity. Most of these questions are answered by, and I'll defer to Chad and Matt on this, that Spokane County Public Works is the sole provider of services in this area, and really no one else can do it. So we restate that in a number of different areas, and also include that Spokane County Public Works may need subcontractor services. Go ahead and scroll down, Ron. And in the event that that will be a part of this encapsulated project that has a project number, we noted that this project could not be completed for the benefit of public or residents for the development necessary without the sole source declaration, and that only expenses incurred will be reimbursed based on the original budget. Once again, all ARP funding is a reimbursement model, and so that was included. We noted due diligence was done by the requester, which included not only the commissioners, but Public Works, County Legal, and the grants management to ensure that this indeed was the best and only approach for the sole source declaration. There is a map that is on another document, unless there's some other questions. Would you like to see the map, or are you well aware of this area?
Why don't you just show the map just for
Okay. Ron, if you don't mind, that would be most appreciated. So I will probably hand this to Jeff or Matt or Chad just to explain a little bit more in detail about the depth and breadth of what Spokane County Public Works serves in this development. That being another component that it is an established development versus new construction.
Yeah, thank you, Ariane. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, this is a portion of the West Terrace project that we're talking about. These roads are the ones where the neighborhoods are experiencing flooding in their crawl spaces and basements. So a portion of this project will involve putting in connections for these individual residents to gather up the groundwater that collects in their crawl spaces and basements and conveying it down to Hayford. There's another portion that goes north from Richland up Hayford and eventually gets up to the commercial developments near the interchange. And then there are another 2 smaller projects, but they're significantly smaller. This is 80 to 90% of the project that you're looking at right here.
Thank you.
So commissioners, we will do that change on the amount and then prepare that for your consent agenda tomorrow, as sole source do need to be approved as part of the process to finalize. We will be doing the ARP required risk assessment in that, and that will be part of the finalization of the sole source.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just going to just clarify. So the 2 RFPs will be going out. Oh, excuse me, Chad, go ahead. I'll let you answer first.
Oh, thank you, Commissioner. Just one quick question for Ariane. Do you need the maps of the remaining portions to be in this document, or is this good enough?
Well, you know, I think since there may be other components, even though they're small, it wouldn't hurt. So if you were able to, that would be great. And we'll just add it to the packet just to be complete.
Give it a shot.
All right.
Yeah, I would say, when, you know, since it is a sole source and we are doing a vote on it, that we would want to make sure that it includes everything that is going to be done with that. So that way it's just clear that that's what commissioners are approving.
There is an accompanying resolution with this. Can you put that up, Ron? So this resolution will also be on consent tomorrow, officially designating the West Terrace Stormwater Project. And you'll see we do have the 5.5 million is correct in the resolution.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. And so that's what I just wanted to clarify that. So the RFPs, the 2 RFPs that we, those will just require a head nod. They go out
Wednesday.
Okay, they go out on Wednesday. Okay, very good. And then they'll be out for 3 weeks.
Correct. So they would go out Wednesday, close in 3 weeks on Wednesday, which I believe is April 20. I don't have a calendar right in front of me here. Yeah, so if you and Commissioner Kearns just kind of give us approval on posting those. Or if there's concerns we need to address, let us know what that is.
I'm good for both of them to go out.
Yep, I agree.
And
Okay.
then the sole source portion will be back before you tomorrow with the typo corrections on consent to start the West Terrace designation.
Okay, very good.
And the additional maps. So we'll get those maps from that and Chad and put them as a single packet.
Okay, well, as long as they're just ensuring that it's all part of included in the proposal that we'll have. So, okay, thank you.
Jeff, I would like to mention real quickly the SERB application, because I would like for the commissioners to be aware and for Mr. Simmons to be aware as the CEO that we'll be submitting today for the broadband. So late Friday, all good things happen on a late Friday. We were having conversations with the South counties and unincorporated area for the potential broadband enhancements. And it was brought to our attention that the Washington State SERB board, which is for economic revitalization, had a direct allocation window that ended today, for which that particular project would allow us to ask up to $50,000, $50,000 for both the South County and West Plains for broadband site study assessment. There would be a match of about $12,500 that would come from the ARP broadband match category, but this would really allow us to come alongside a firm to do a full site assessment in preparation for the larger broadband grant that we're expecting to come out in May that we would like to apply for, that could be in up to about 30 million. So that did have a very short turnaround, and we have the information prepared and would like to submit it today, but we wanted for you to be aware that we were doing that in conjunction with grants management, and I think would be a very good use of our 12,000 matching funds and show some good site study components to accompany grants in the near future.
I'm good with that. I know you guys have been working really hard with the South County mayors, so I appreciate all the efforts that you guys are putting into that. So I think that would probably be really helpful as we move forward with that bigger broadband grant. So I'm good.
And one more thing, I just realized from Gino, we don't have the resolution officially posted on consent for tomorrow. We are still within the window that we can add it if the two of you are willing to do that.
Either that or we can just take it by leave, right? That'd probably be easier than changing the actual printed consent agenda. But
Yeah,
I think it's important. I think we vote on it tomorrow, but just whatever the easiest logistical way to get it done, I'm fine with. Whatever.
So I guess, Erin, does it have to be turned in today, though?
I believe we have a 24-hour notice to have it on the agenda. So we could either repost the agenda or take it by leave. I know Public Works would like to get started, and we just had a miscommunication on getting that posted.
Okay, so are we talking the resolution for the
resolution for
the sole source?
Sole source.
Okay.
That's the piece. Yes.
So, I mean, I guess this is a question for Mark. Mark, it sounds like Commissioner Kearns and I are both happy to do whatever we need to do, make sure it's on the agenda, it gets approved tomorrow.
Yes, Commissioner, you could certainly take that by leave would be fine.
Okay, then that's probably the easiest, just to do it that way.
I would think so.
Okay. Sorry, I guess I was getting confused as we were talking about the other grant. So then, Arian, for yours, we need to do an approval today.
This would just be to actually submit the grant. So it was your awareness. What will happen is the SERB board meets in May, and we will have a more formal presentation of our ask, and that will then be the point in which we are awarded the amount of $50,000 along with our $12,500, and then we would bring that award to you to receive on consent. We just wanted both you and Mr. Simmons to be aware that was going out the door officially on behalf of Spokane County.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, any other questions for Jeff or Arian? Seeing none, thank you very much. Like I said, I know you guys are working hard and we really appreciate it. And thank you for all the efforts in helping us get these ARP dollars out.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay. Looking at my timing. Next on the agenda, we're just a little ahead. So I see we've got people joining. But I know Scott Simmons, you're going to be the one who's going to introduce our next topic.
Yes, thanks, Commissioner Cooney. We have been, our building and planning department have been working diligently on a number of initiatives in the last year, all the way from putting all of our permits online to allow for builders and the community to submit online permits to expedite the process. They did some redesign in their downstairs on the first floor of the Public Works building to make it more kind of customer centric and allow for a lot of interactions and receiving of permit questions, pre-development meetings, that sort of thing. And recognizing the importance of what the team does, driving a significant portion of our economic development in our community, we wanted to start to work on some dashboarding that demonstrated how the team was performing in turning around permits quickly, moving land use actions through. So both Scott and James have been working on some metrics, some performance measures to be able to show to the commissioners and also to the community. And the intention is that we will be doing this on a quarterly basis. It's I would say a work in process. They've got a really great framework to share with you today, but it's not like anything we do, it's not final. It will always evolve and improve and continue to respond to what you all are looking for and what we think is helpful for our community. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Scott and James, and they'll share with you what they've been developing.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to reiterate, we really appreciate the support from the commissioners and from Scott to make these changes. It's not hard, or it's not easy rather, as everyone knows, to turn the ship of state, as they say. And some of these have gone up and, with some bumps and speed bumps along the route, but we're really made great progress in 21, particularly on our building side. And we're catching up now on the land use side coming into 22. We do have some slides to share with you if Ron's available. There we go. And as Scott said, we're anticipating doing this quarterly, and also as we'll wrap up, we'll start to talk about how we're continuing to use our web for almost real-time processing, so that these data will be available more or less at someone's convenience. Next slide, please. What we'd like to do is take you with a little bit of background, because among the things that we have refined over the course of 21 is trying to put a better mission, vision, values statement group together so that we can describe more accurately to our customers what it is that really happens here. As all of you know, most planning building departments are seen as nothing more than regulatory shops that are very good at saying no to projects that come through. We want to turn that around and be partners in development. We want to be part of a growth agency. We want to share to our audience that we intend to be very best practices in the state We want to be, as our CEO has charged us, we want to be the go-to place for development because we anticipate and work with our people in a meaningful way. Next slide, please. The three values that you're seeing here, I can say with some confidence, having been in this business a really long time, which of course is kind of hard to say sometimes as we get more white hair. But that top bullet point is, I don't believe any planning building shop in the state, probably almost anywhere, has that as a performance measure. That we simply understand that when people are investing in the county, they're putting capital at risk. Planning shops, building codes, everything, they really don't take that into account. It's just like, okay, it's a project, here's what you have to do. Not understanding that second one, time is money, not understanding that we are here to partner to get something built safely, which is that third point. Next slide, please. What we do is essentially four things. We're going to talk about the middle two today. We have talked a little bit about comprehensive planning, and you're getting a preview of that in an upcoming session as we move into our longer range issues. But we're going to talk about the two middle ones today, which are the land use side of our shop and the building permit side. It's part of what we call the continuum of investment and development that runs from an idea all the way to a certificate of occupancy. Next slide, please. So what you're seeing here is a summary of the land use activity for year 21. You can see the various categories: preliminary plats, final plats, preliminary short plats, which are land divisions of 4 lots or less. The shoreline exemptions, the accessory dwelling units or ADUs, and the certificates of exemption. What you can see on the bottom 2 lines of each of these is an average of days to decision and a median. And the average is literally that for all those projects that decisions were made. The median, more statistically meaningful, is the number right in the middle, where the same number of applications took longer, the same number of applications are shorter. We think that's a better metric for doing that because it eliminates the true outliers. And on plats especially, remember, sometimes they get lost, or I shouldn't say lost, they get deferred. Developers take a long time to respond on things. So the numbers are within that range. One thing that we found really useful in this is on the plat measures, where it's the median's 106 days and the short plat 50 days. As you'll see later on, when we look at our land use side, we believe there's a 60 to 90 day window that we can perform reliably on every kind of a plat to get it to a hearing examiner decision. At 106, we're really not too far off of that. And what's important to realize here is, as we talked about putting our building permits online, digital, and now we're doing that, but we're not there yet for land use. It's going to take another few months to work that system out. What that means is our tracking system called SmartGov has something in it called a stop clock, or what I like to call the chess clock. And that's that if we have a project, building permit, land use action, where we reach a point of saying we have to send this back for questions, corrections, additional documents, you should be able to hit that chess clock, and then the timing is back on the developer and their team to perform. These numbers do not show what that stop clock would be. So what you can infer from these is there's a gap of days in here where all of these plats were back at their originator and not necessarily in our shop with the clock ticking. We're going to be able to track that very best, or much better in 22 and going forward, to be able to really show how quickly we can move these things forward. So those are the raw numbers for where we are. And among the issues to really consider in a different way beyond the report, a policy decision, that last one, certificate of exemptions. Those are exemptions from the state subdivision ordinances that we've also brought into Spokane County subdivision ordinances. And there's a range of exceptions. generally that allow for the creation of 20 and mostly 10-acre lots based on availability of public transportation, chiefly a public road. What this allows, though, is because it's an exemption, it's totally separate from the subdivision process, requires no public involvement, no public input, no review of what happens, because the presumption is you're simply dividing land. It's a system that's being used by sophisticated investors to essentially create large 10-lot or 10-acre plats. And we want to be able to look at this and provide you with some recommendations on how to better use that. Because among other things, it happens a lot in what's called the urban reserve, the transition area around the urban growth areas that's outside of the ability to provide urban services. And what it means is the urban areas were to grow, say, over a 50-year time, you're going to hit these areas that have now been put in 10-acre parcels that can't feasibly be redeveloped into urban style, quarter-acre lots. And so it's a real barrier to the long-term growth and economic sustainability of the county. That said, the rest of this, you can see the medians are we think are pretty good shape, and we look forward to moving all of those numbers forward. So next slide, please. What you'll see upcoming is a comparison of land use actions from 20 and 21. There's not too much difference other than the preliminary plats are up nicely for 21 compared to 2020. And that's a sign of growth. That's a sign of confidence that there's a market for development. It's also a reflection of the fact that as the board declared a housing emergency in 2020, land developers and those that are subdividing land are listening to that and moving forward in response to that housing market emergency. Next slide, please. And we're going to let my colleague, James, talk a little bit about the building permit side of this. I just want to remind you, though, that even though we've got the building permits fully digitized, we're still working on perfecting the use of that stop clock, where staff are getting used to using that. So some of these numbers, especially the earlier ones in the year, still don't reflect that ability of us to really track the actual days we have in time. So,
definitely. As you know, the 2020 and 2021, we went through a large push on single family homes. Commercial structures have stayed pretty consistent through from 18 through 21, but the residential side, and this was not specifically with the code change, this, as we pulled the data into this PowerPoint, we realized that some of the short platting and plat process has generated significant amount of homes coming in. And you'll see, they on the residential dwelling top left, were the average ready to issue, not issue, ready to issue, because sometimes they'll wait to pull that permit, was at 59 days. And then the median is 45. Accessory structures, we had some stumbling there with that 38-day and then the 34-day. The one thing Scott and I, as we've gotten our feet under us with getting these pushed through and with the reorganization Mr. Simmons put together, we've revamped it, and you'll see that here in a moment. But the reason why these I chose these are because these are the indicators on where the money's moving to. Right now, we have the residential dwellings up, the accessory structures up, and I put the mechanical permits in there because that's where the remodels happen. Typically, in every remodel in a home, you're going to touch mechanical somehow. And so I wanted to make sure that that number was collected, because you'll see, 2,900 permits for mechanical alone. That's outside of new single family. So that's 2,900 remodels or furnaces or things of that nature. So people are looking to update what they have to either sell or, live in for the remainder of however they're gonna own the home. So I just wanted to point that out. That's why I collected that data. Next slide. And then you're gonna see, so from 2020, 61% was new residential. And then it shifted over the 21 to where people were now comfortable in that it's the ebb and flow. So we had a large amount of new residential homes. And then in 21, everyone said, okay, I'm happy with my home. Now I want a new garage, or I want a deck, or things of that nature. And so that's what we found in 21, we went up from 36 to 42%.
And one of the things I'm sure Scott remembers, and I believe the commissioners do too, is we had a huge pulse of permit requests come in early 2020 as part of the multi-year code cycle change, and we went through what we called March Madness to try to reduce those. But that also shows why there's a high number of permits in 2020 as well. Next slide.
Next slide.
Okay. What you'll see here is a quarter-to-quarter comparison from first quarter of 21 to almost the entire first quarter of 22. We're not quite there yet, but we wanted to get this for you. And so what you can see in the first two columns on the left is a healthy growth of land use applications between the two quarters. Short plats are roughly not really coming in right now. So we've got that, not so much a big deal, but I'm sorry, the others all show really healthy growth. And then on the permits ready to issue side, here's one where you see so many more in that first quarter of 2020 to the first quarter of 21. That is the code cycle pulse. And if you've got any direct questions about that, but that's something that we will see periodically. Code cycles are updated every 4 years now. And as we all know, building code, energy code, fire code books never get smaller for some reason. They always grow. And depending on the severity of those, in this case cycle, there's a big deal in the energy codes, yes. Right? And so that prompted a lot of builders to try to push projects through faster. So that pulse is going to change with each of those cycles. And by the way, though, the difference in commercial permits from one quarter, first quarter to 22 is a healthy growth on that. Next slide, please. This slide and the next are looking at essentially that 5-year, 6-year cycle of how are we, what's the trend? And you can see the chart on the left side of this is final plats, which means those are ones that are getting ready to sell lots for development. And you can see both submitted and recorded coming through here. The recorded ones show a modest but healthy trend line that's up. Again, not surprising with a housing crisis, but it also shows respect for investing in Spokane County. On the short plats, again, much fewer lots created, but it also shows that nice trend of more projects coming through. And preliminary plats, again, there's that low preliminary plat in 2020 versus 21. Something of an anomaly. It's hard to factor in. We can't have any causation data on how COVID and people's behavior affected that, but it seems clear there's some influence on where that was. Next slide, please. And remember, well, go ahead. These are the building side, and you can see new residential dwellings, the accessory structures in the middle, and sometimes a little harder to see, but that green band on top are commercial new permits. You can see 2020 again, well above the normal range, reflecting that code surge. But what's really interesting and helpful about that is if you remember back in the last slide, the 2018 final plats showed 14 that had been recorded. If you look then at 2019 permits, 928 residential permits were pulled essentially on those 14 or other lots. So that's we think that's a really healthy ratio of growth that's good for the community.
Yeah, I just want to add on to that. So the 2018, 2019 land use actions created basically the 2017 land use actions. I always attribute to 1 year down the road. So in the 2019 new single families, that's 927 new single families. Then you have the 2018 of 40 land use actions coming into play, which equated into 928 new single family homes. So that's how Scott and we view this continuum, is that we have the land use actions happen, and then we have the surge of new single family or some commercial, but the majority is based off that new single family.
Next slide, please. These last few slides are we're really going to talk about performance, kind of where we are, where we intend to go, how we're going to demonstrate that, and the commitments we're going to be making to our public and to you, the commissioners who represent that public. This slide and the next slide represent what you see there, the Plat Workflow, and it's how a plat goes through our system. Many of you get questions from time to time. Where's my plat? How come it's been here? It's been months. Why can't I get it back? And we wanted to run through the steps that happen. So the first three are here. One is what we call the pre-application, the pre-conference. It is an introductory meeting where people come in and they ask, what do we need? And so these are the forms, which are going to become electronic. These are the zoning rules. This is, here's the playing field for what you're looking for. Most of our bigger platting partners are professional teams, and they know most of these things. It's still a useful thing, we believe, because that last line there, even the professionals will often have something that runs up a red flag, something that looks a little challenging, and we can identify it better up front. You'll see in a couple slides another way we're going to improve this. That second bullet point is the important one, because that's where the clock starts for us. When they submit a full, complete, formal application, taking into account what they heard at the pre-app conference, now we've got something that we can review. On the building side, it already works that when they hit click to submit on the electronic submittals, it goes immediately, concurrently to all of the reviewing parties. Whereas in the old days, when we had plans that come through, first one would review, sign off, walk the plans over to somebody else, sign off, and so forth. So this is also going to apply to the land use side, which is by necessary, it's more, I don't want to say confusing, but it's more complicated and doesn't have as many distinct, easy to check off steps, but it will let that review happen on the land use side. And that's the third point on here is we're going through that, notifying applicants, agencies, and other things. Next slide, please. Some of the things that we do to follow up include the SEPA checklist, and then the bullet 5 is we convene a technical review meeting, and that generally involves everybody that touches the permit. That has not happened as much as we expected. It's in our, it's on our paper checklist of things to happen. But this has been one of the shortcomings in the process for plats in 2021. It's one you'll see in another slide or two that we know we can affect because of essentially project management systems. So that's in place. And then once all of that is done, you get to step 6, which is scheduling the process before the hearing examiner. Generally, those are scheduled, about 30 days out. One of the things we're going to do in the future when we have these systems in place with expectations is when we hit that step 2 and have that first formal application is we're going to schedule, we're going to put a place marker on the hearing examiner calendar no more than 90 days out. And that will be our commitment to our land developers. We will hit that number as long as your team can perform in these gaps where you've got error corrections or need additional documents. And you can see that summarized in the bottom. We can hit that 60 to 90 days. We've got the team and the talent to make that happen. What we have to have is the partner in development. Just as we want to be a partner, they have to be a partner too, and not just blame us when something goes wrong. But you can see here, oftentimes there is a significant lapse of time between that first and second step and between the fifth and sixth step. To a landowner that doesn't necessarily pay attention to exactly how their civil engineer works, it's easy to say that's all because it's still in the county, when in fact, and we're not trying to blame our customers at all, but we're trying to have an honest assessment of what is it we can do as a government. And we are, when we send something back for corrections, there's nothing. We sit and wait for that then to come back to us for that. And so those are the things that we're going to be working with our customers going forward. Next slide, please. And these are kind of where the rubber hits the road in many ways. Building and Planning did a very detailed cost recovery study in 2010. It was part of, at the time, reviewing fees under the cost recovery model for an enterprise fund. It served that purpose. As you see here, those fees and that methodology were then subsequently tied to federal indices for consumer price, for Labor Bureau statistics, so that they can move as the economy moves, and we don't have to redo this study every 3 years. We're using this methodology now to look at timing and performance, because this did quantify how many hours does it take on average to work through a plat, and that hourly rate relates to payroll, benefits, overhead. And so we can go back to the fee side of this and look at performance measures. So we've got a really powerful tool to look at how that was happening. And in some ways, land planning in 2010 and land planning in 2021 haven't changed very much in terms of that evaluative process. And so that's why the methodology we think is still valid, but it gives us a great benchmark on looking at where we can make improvements to make that happen. Next slide, please. And here's where we're pulling everything together. That top line is really, there's an awful lot in that. And when we say introducing a project management team or a PMT system into this, what it does is it provides that mechanism. In an older version, it is literally a set of notes, cover sheet that follows a project from start to finish, that is a cumulative record of every action taken place, every assignment on that action, with responsibilities, with expectations on how long it takes, and a check mark on when it's done. It's based quite simply on construction management for how you put up a large project, and who are the independent vendors, the subcontractors that all touch it, and how are they aligned. We've introduced this in other places, and it works. It's a really effective tool for applying to permits and land management, especially because of the various reviewing agencies. So we're excited to pull this together. It becomes actually much more feasible to do this once we become a digital shop, because all those tracking measurements are right there, including that stop clock or the chest clock. And so we'll have that to move forward. And what you'll see here are kind of those commitments. One thing to understand is when we pointed out early on that 106-day and even the 45-day permit, this department is, I will say in the Lake Wobegon, above average. Most permitting departments are taking considerably longer to work through the same kinds of things that we do, our peer departments. So we're happy that what we have is at least at a good benchmark to start. And the challenge, of course, is to take an effective process and make it even more predictable with professional reviews and so on. So that relates to these two things. We're going to commit to a 90-day calendar for land use actions, and we're going to commit to a 21-day calendar for commercial and 7 days for residential plan review. The caveat is, again, partnership. As if we tell our partners up front that, yes, we can hit 90 days, or yes, we can hit 21 days, if you do these things to work with us, then we're not being disingenuous. We're not blaming delays on everybody. We're saying, here's the calendar we can all hit together if this entire team performs.
I'd like to add on to that. So with the 21-day and the 7-day, if any of the reviewers that are touching the project, within 21 days, they either sign off or ask for corrections. So if they're all hitting those timeframes, then within 21 days, they've already signed off corrections. So it should be ready to issue, or it should be back in the developer's hands. So that's why I wanted to make sure that we're going to touch it within that time frame, and they're either signing off or they're saying within that time frame, they're saying that there are items still needed.
Next slide, please. Our last slide for you is how we're going to be able to communicate and market our message and our commitments and our expectations. We have made quite a lot of minor improvements to our website already. These are going to be a little more major because we want a lot of this to be on our front page as the first things you see when you come to that site. Some of it will be continuing. The permit portal is such an important thing to have on that front page. But to be able to show people right up front, here's our mission, vision, values. Yeah, we're going to commit to you that we understand, you're investing in the community. More to that second point, the value of that project management team approach is going to be it's like, these are the benchmarks we can hit if we work collectively, county developer as a team. And then as Scott mentioned early on, we will have an actual dashboard on that website that will track and we're going to work on this. We think our software is going to be able to do this as well, but something close to real-time activity. Here's what's happening in building and planning right now. Here are the metrics on how fast permits are going through, or where land actions and plats are. And then top of that, we're going to be able to show we have 8 preliminary plats in our queue right now. We're on this schedule, but it will give an applicant a chance to see, okay, there's 8 that are in ahead of me. I'm not going to be 90 days right from me, but I'm going to have some, an estimated time of where those are going to go through. So all the way from the very beginning, we're going to be transparent with our clients and our customers to talk about that.
To add on to that, this dashboard will, on the permitting side, the one thing that we've been able to do is to get the message to the industry that if you call down here and say, who needs to look at my permit, who's left to look at my permit, and then we're going to be able to do it on the land use side as well. Who needs to look at it? I'm pulling up the same data that you're able to do from home. So when a contractor submits a permit, they're going to see who needs to sign it off and what the status of each one is. And then they'll be able to contact those areas with concerns. If you call me, I'm looking at the same exact data that you would look at. So it's our portal on the permitting side right now is real-time data. And so what we want to do is, as we are able to float over to the land use side and create this dashboard, everything's real time. There's I guess no benefit with coming down and saying, where's my information, when we're able to provide that all up front, because we want that transparency. We want you to know that, you have 3 left, 2 left, 1 left, and call those people. And that way it doesn't create the smoke and mirrors of, well, it's waiting for this, it's waiting for that. You have that real-time information.
And we'll wrap up. That last one is more of a kind of a teaser on news and current events. That really relates as much to the long range side and the public participation guidelines that we're going to be bringing back to you for amendment in April. we're going to have more of a presence on that front page of what's happening in terms of the longer range look at that. So next slide, last slide, please. That's what we have for you, commissioners. Happy to take any questions you may have.
Mr. Kearns, do you want to go first?
Yeah, back on slide 7, where it was about your building permits, the residential dwellings, it's average days to ready to issue was 59, median was 45. I mean, what do you hope to get that down to? Or is that, do you feel that's an acceptable time frame?
So I'll say, Commissioner, those are extremely unacceptable times. Right at this time, and I met with Condren Homes, Craig Roberts, and they're getting their homes within 14 calendar days. So we're right around 7 to 10 days for new single family homes. The mechanical permits have dropped down. We pulled the data and we're trying to get that polished up to get in circulation. We've taken the residential accessory structures that's showing 38 and 34, and now we're down to 7 and 9. The one thing to keep in mind is that this doesn't include, these timeframes do not include the stop clock, and these timeframes for the median are calendar days, not the business days. And so we've whittled those down to almost half, if not further than that. We're hoping that the 21-day and the 7-day mark will stick as regarding business days. The one thing that we cannot control is if someone on Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock submits 10 homes, that puts Friday, Saturday, and Sunday on the clock. And then Monday we come into work and the reviewing agencies, again, the scattershot approach, everyone has it at the same time. And so that's when we're able to get it. Well, we've already picked up 3 calendar days. So that's why we're after that 7 business days.
Okay. When you say you highlighted Condren Homes there, did you say 10 to 14? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I spoke specifically with the person in their office that addresses their permitting, and she said it was 17 calendar days.
Oh, 17.
Then when we looked at it, it came down to, I believe it was 10 business days.
Okay, is that just one? I mean, is that just one anecdotal example, or I mean, or is that something? Have you run reports to see is that standard across the board for anybody submitting a building permit?
That is standard across the board. And again, we have that data that we're just polishing up the numbers like we've done here. And so we can get that to you today.
Okay. All right, thank you.
And then generally speaking, as we do this quarterly, when we come back and see you potentially in July, you will start to see only 22 data, and we expect to be able to show some demonstrated improvements, even though we're working through getting this stop clock fully implemented.
Okay, thank you.
So I have a couple of questions. So one of them is, stakeholder meetings. Are you meeting regularly with stakeholders? I know there's kind of a permitting meeting that goes on with all of, kind of planners, permitters, with the home builders, but are we meeting specifically with them just as we try to improve the process to see what they, our stakeholders see as kind of the pinch point?
I believe so. Every month I meet with the regional code groups, and that's through the Home Builders Association. And what they do is they bring the data of concerns to that meeting, and we get that addressed if I haven't heard from them prior. Right now, I believe Craig Roberts is the president of the Home Builders. It was Ben McCurdy. Now it's Craig. And so they provide that data of where we are sitting idle, where the concern is at. And so what I've done, I've taken this, well, Scott and I have taken 21 to polish up and get rid of that stagnant time. to find out where exactly what it is. How can we improve our processes to reduce that stagnant time? How are we not compared, but how are we working in unison with the other jurisdictions? Are we calling the same things? That's the one thing that code group was established for, is so if I'm requiring, and I'm just going to use this as for layman's terms, if I'm requiring pressure treated wood for decks in the county, but the valley is not, then we need to have a serious conversation of maybe we're doing it wrong, or maybe they're doing it wrong. So that's what that code group meeting was established for. But what I have taken it, I've taken it and morphed it to let me know how I can produce, a quicker product, because it's a symbiotic circle. We're attached, and if we're not doing our part to assist them, then they're going to go somewhere else. And so that's our biggest concern. And I think in our opening to this PowerPoint, time is money, and for a builder, even a small time builder, for them to put their capital on the line for a projected time frame, that's why we take this to heart. We're not taking this lightly.
And Commissioner, let me add to that in a couple of ways. One, there isn't that same sense of, I don't say concern, but the analogous part of land use and platting is a little different than where's my permit. We don't get quite the same kind of concerns. However, our outreach effort is going to go in a couple of ways. One, we hinted at this, the Plan Commission is reviewing the public participation guidelines that the county adopted in 1998, and we're going to bring those back to you for your consideration in April. Among those things is it opens up participation beyond just being reactive to calls of what's going on. We will be more outgoing. We will be more actively going out and soliciting comments from the long-range comprehensive plan down to, James with the home builders. It's like, how are we doing? And we're going to have that as sort of a continual question. We will also have the ability on our web, much like you've seen with the comprehensive plan amendments, where you can see that on a page, you can click on the supporting documents, you can now leave a comment. We're going to have that system for everything we do on these bigger land use activities, so the public can see a land plat that's coming in that might be in their neighborhood. Otherwise, they'd never be notified until the plat goes formal. So we'll be able to be much more publicly responsive to telling people what's going on, here in building and planning.
Okay, and Scott, one other question I have, and then I know we're over on time, but I've had discussions here lately with citizens, developers. You and I were out in the valley at talking to, kind of looking at what we can do for transitional lot size adjustments to existing developments, because I'm getting a lot of citizens. I mean, I think the valley is kind of, I don't know if they're unique, and how some of their lots are and some of the developable land is. But having, 1 acre lots, a development that's all 1 acre lots, to then have in their backyard, 8 homes per acre, is causing a lot of heartburn for them. And honestly, for the developers are not, liking it as well either, because it's a lot more criticism that's coming on the developer as well. And so is there a way that we can look at because a lot of other communities have that transitional, if we can take a look at that as you come forward.
Absolutely, Commissioner. And we have some basic tools to do that in the comprehensive plan now that talk about neighborhood context for development. Those tools are not really effectively codified in our zoning code itself, so we have to use them in a more consultative role right now. But what you're describing is unfortunately a fairly common occurrence where what was previously sort of an edge development for a community that has larger lots because it's moving into the kind of open space farmland, but then part of an urban growth area that comes along much later. It might be an otherwise more difficult piece of land to develop, but now that you can go up to 8 units an acre, the economics pencil out. And so that break in character is really important for us to look at in the future. In terms of, we're going to start writing staff reports for these plats that talk about context and character. And so we're going to give that to the hearing examiner as a tool to put into place on evaluating those plats. We're not entirely certain of how that's going to transpire because we haven't really used that tool too much in the past, but it's something that we have available to us now. And it's something that we're very much interested in strengthening, particularly as we're looking at adding residential lands through comprehensive plan amendments and other things. It's be nice to have a better set of tools that factor in urban design, neighborhood design, and context into, even if it's a 20-acre parcel, essentially it's an infill parcel, and it really should have some context of what's around it when it goes in. So we're very much moving in that path, and we'll start to see some things happening in 22.
Okay, and then I have a couple sent me some information as I've talked to them that other jurisdictions are doing. So I will forward that to you as I get that information.
Of course, at your convenience.
Okay, thank you. Scott.
Yes, thanks, Commissioner. I just wanted to give some props to both James and Scott. The importance of showing this stuff, even though it doesn't, at least the 2021 numbers don't show where they both feel that we want to be or should be. We don't know how to improve or where we need to improve if we're not measuring it and we're not showing it. So the importance of bringing this to the commissioners, the importance for their teams to be tracking, utilizing internally on expectations, accountabilities, transparency, predictability, reliability, all that sort of stuff is really important. So it's the start of the data, and as they've highlighted, there's a few things that are going to be changing and modifying as they get their hands around how the system shows the data and how it's being tracked and counted on days. So it's a really great start for them, and just wanted to give them a shout out for their demonstrated willingness and ability to get the information in front of you all commissioners as well as the public as well.
Thanks, Scott.
No, I really appreciate that, and I appreciate both of you and working hard and listening to us. And I know working with Scott because I'm out listening and talking to people. It's Spokane County pre-COVID was the best. I think COVID kind of kicked everybody a little bit in this craziness, but excited that you guys are working hard to really get us back there. So I just want to say thank you very much, and people I talk to truly do appreciate all the work that you guys are doing. So thank you, and we're just going to continue to make it better. So I appreciate that.
Appreciate the kind words. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And by the way, just as a kind of an aside of Jeff's item before we jumped on, that West Terrace and the stormwater plan that's being proposed out there is building and planning could not be stronger supporting of where that is going. You saw last year some comprehensive plan amendments on the West Plains with some very unhappy people about more development coming into that area that had these stormwater and absorption problems. Getting this in place is just a huge benefit for the community. So be assured we are completely behind Public Works on this.
Great, thank you, appreciate it. Okay, I know we're a little behind schedule. I apologize to the next group. Thank you very much for hanging in there with us. So the next group is going to be Doug Chase to talk about Avista Stadium matters. But Scott, I'm going to let you start off with. I think you wanted to do an intro for us.
Yes, thanks, Commissioner. So back in January, end of January, we had a couple of workshops with the commissioners that was talking about the Avista Stadium master planning, facility improvements that were needed to comply with MLB mandates. Part of that discussion included the commissioner's request for our team to bring together a group of stakeholders to develop some suggested parks, recreational amenities, community sports, trailhead improvements that could be considered for packaging together with an Avista Stadium ask. So Doug has done that. The ask was to bring that to today, and he's worked diligently with groups to be able to do that. What you'll see today is a list of projects, and I won't steal Doug's thunder of how that was come up with and ranked and all that sort of stuff. But I wanted to just set the framework that these are ideas. These are a number of projects across the county. The dollar amount of that, the number of projects, for those who are watching, are certainly not set in stone by any means. It is the start of the conversation with the commissioners and with the community around the depth, the breadth of these projects. So by no means should this be looked at as these are the investments that are going to be made and it's moving forward. It's really just the start of the discussion around how does this seem to reflect what the commissioners were looking for, what sort of modifications, changes. There's a dollar amount in here, and you'll see some analysis that Doug's team put together that are kind of some if-then scenarios. But whether the list of projects as a whole are what the final will be, whether it will be less, whether it will be more, I just want to make sure that you had all that context, that this is just from the stakeholder group that came together. Here's where they understood the ask to be from the commissioners, and they basically drew the line themselves. It wasn't something that the commissioners said, hey, 38 million is the max or whatever. It's really just this was some of the projects that came out of that exercise. So with that. Yep.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. Doug, I'm going to check because I think I saw Eric Sawyer as an attendee. If you would like him moved to a panelist since he was part of that group. I see Garrett Jones, and there we go. We've got them both up there. So just in case you need them to speak.
Sure.
Thank you.
That sounds great. And I am, again, good morning. Thank you. We're excited to provide the presentation, and I believe that should be popping up for us. There we go. Okay. Mixing it up a little bit. Kind of fun to show one of the projects there. Sneak peek of the Beacon Hill. And again, thank you for that introduction. We can now jump to the last slide. No, I'm kidding. That was a great summary, and I'm excited to go through and speak in a little bit more depth to some of the projects. And again, just the thought that has gone into putting this list together as a starting point. So on the next slide, and again, Scott covered this pretty well. So we're happy to come back with, again, a recommendation, a starting point, if you will, from our last workshop. So we'll go ahead to the next slide. And we put together a little committee made up of myself, Mr. Eric Sawyer with the Spokane Regional Sports Commission, Garrett Jones, City of Spokane Parks Director, and we had also assistance from our staff. And those are the folks that really helped put a lot of time in this. I really appreciate it. And as we segue into the next slide, you can see we started by identifying a few key categories of projects. And you can see these. We leaned heavily, again, with that task of identifying existing needs, projects that serve the greatest number of individuals within the county, countywide. We looked heavily at existing plans, capital improvement plans, both within the county, the city. We had a lot to work with, which is just great. Looking more specifically, we developed criteria to help reflect that. Usage, the volume of utilization was a key factor, which we'll show here shortly. And then we drilled down a little bit more individually. You can see how the projects, we tried to look at grant potential to help leverage additional funds with whatever may be bonded. You'll see we have an alternate project. Does the project serve the greatest number of people, regional attraction, economic development, favorably identified in a plan, and will it help us renovate or enhance an existing facility to meet those needs? We have waiting, and I think we're good. We looked at the lead department or agency as well, ranked by scoring. And if we can go ahead and move to the next slide, this comes together beautifully in the form of a spreadsheet where you can see we have the weighted points to those different categories, trying to follow suit and help us prioritize as just to demonstrate what we looked at. And you can see we have the lead agency there. So our first category is trails, where we've identified 3 projects, the third being an alternate. And on the next slide, I will speak in a little more detail where we are able to show within the county where this is at. And for the Fish Lake Trail project, this project would include paving by connecting 2 overpasses or bridges, approximately 5,000 linear feet or just under a mile of trail that would extend from our Fish Lake trailhead there at the county's Fish Lake Park east to the end of the currently paved portion of the trail, which is just west of Queen Lucas Lake. The Make Beacon Hill Public Phase 2, Shields and Camp Saconnie Park renovations and enhancements. That was that photo on the introduction slide there, number 7 on the map. And this is a really neat project because it involves both county-owned and City of Spokane-owned parkland. And it's that next step in a lot of the conservation land acquisition and trailhead. And this project, again, would be great. It would, let me find my more expanded explanation. It would fund the renovation of the Shields Park and Camp Saconnie, both major access points to the Beacon Hill Trail systems. Enhancements would include expanded paved parking, lighting, stormwater, and other ancillary enhancements. And then the Argonne Gap is just that. We have this gap in the Centennial Trail there where we would look at an overpass. And again, this is an alternate project. So in terms of the total funding that's included, it does not include the estimated cost for this project. But the thought is if grants or other sources of funds and additional funds could be leveraged, we would have some potential to complete an extra project. So on the next slide.
So Doug, quick question.
Yes.
Before you move forward, one slide back, it showed, Fish Lake Trail Phase 3 completion. It showed the lead agency or department as the City of Spokane. Wouldn't that be Spokane County?
Actually, no, the City of Spokane owns the right of way there, and that's actually a City of Spokane project with regional significance. We happen to have our county Fish Lake Park right there.
Okay.
So there is a theme you'll see with some of the city parks. They are very intentionally have a very regional service effect, which we felt was, again, a really good fit for the task.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, looking at the parks category, again, we have some our regional parks, which are anticipated to have the most, a little more in the utilization factor. You can see on the scoring as far as numbers served, but across the board there, our Liberty Lake Regional Park Phase 2 and 3 renovation, Bear Lake Regional Park Phase 1, and then we have some projects again that you may recognize: Holmberg Glenwood tennis court renovation, pickleball conversion, more there at Holmberg with off-leash dog park development, demo that older pool, pickleball expansion, and a future land for future park there in the West Plains. And on the next slide, again, I'll speak in a little more depth to these projects. And we can see where these are at across the county. So with the Bear Lake Regional Park, this would fund the renovation of the shoreline areas within the park, including removal of the failing gabion baskets, construction of the new beach, lake access areas, new kayak canoe launch, new fishing piers, ADA enhancements. Septic system would be added to the west side and so forth. So, and you may recall we have design work underway right now. So that would be the Bear Lake enhancements that we've identified for consideration. Let's see, Liberty Lake Regional Park. I guess I kind of went to the top of the map, but if we jump there to the lower east side, again, we have some major projects there at Liberty Lake. Phase 2, 3, again, summarized would include renovation and modernization of the campground, pathway, boardwalk enhancements, restroom renovations, and other enhancements throughout the park, which would be very well enjoyed. The Holmberg Linwood Tennis Court renovation, pickleball, the graphics there below the legend show a little shot of the existing asphalt there. And here we're looking at basically our Linwood and Holmberg parks. We would renovate the tennis courts at Linwood to be more usable, and the tennis courts at Holmberg would be renovated and utilized for pickleball in that particular project. And again, the next one being the off-leash dog park is a project that's been identified for many years within our capital improvement plan that the community has shown a lot of support for. And we would love the opportunity, again, as identified, to demo the old pool area and repurpose that space for a future pickleball court expansion at that site. And then again, our planning and growth identifies need for future parkland acquisition in the West Plains. Next slide. And our third category being community sports, our Plants Ferry Sports Complex Phase 1 renovation. Here we've looked at a lot of different scenario out at Plants Ferry. So again, this particular phase of development, we would propose renovating and illuminating 2 of the softball fields, 4 of the soccer fields, illumination in a portion of the parking lots that would service those fields. This would provide for complete irrigation supply improvements, stormwater compliance improvements, and miscellaneous improvements to structures, irrigation, site furniture, fencing, et cetera, among others. And then with the field lighting there, we have identified, and I'll go ahead, why don't we move to the next slide? And I'll speak to the field lighting. And this is for illustration purposes, but the thought is that there would be opportunities for field lighting enhancements, either within the city of Spokane or the county. And we identified 2 facilities here for purposes of scoring and illustrating what could be done. And the Southeast Sports Complex fields are one example, and Franklin Park is another. And again, for this one, it would be to be determined with further evaluation should these projects continue on the list. And there in the photo is a nice photo there of our Plants Ferry, the county's Plants Ferry Sports Facility. Next slide. Again, this should look familiar. We plugged in our remaining phases for the Avista Stadium estimated costs. Next slide. And when we combine these all together, we can see where the different projects, and we've tried to again illustrate categories through coloring within the graphic, and you can see it regionally there on the left and a nice close up on the center. So next slide. Okay, This is a great summary where we've pulled together the estimated costs of the projects. And again, just pointing out, when we're looking at the Trails, Parks, Community Sports project, the dollar amount does not include that Argonne Gap as an alternate. So again, that's identified with the thought that additional funds could be leveraged through grants and so forth, and or good bids. It's hard to say, always hard to predict the construction climate for the next period of 5 to 9 years. But that's what we're looking at here in these estimates. And what we've tried to illustrate is the two different funding options dealing with public ballot measure, one of those being the temporary levy lid lift option, the other being the tax levy option, the first being a 9-year period, and the second being a 20-year period. And what we learned, you may recall back in our January workshops, if we look at that 9-year levy lid lift, we've estimated that about 87% of whatever that levy amount would be net available for the projects themselves, and looking at that shorter period of time, where if we look at the 20-year, we would project, or we've estimated that we would net about 74% of whatever that total levy amount is. So the chart provides an example of the amount that would need to be an estimate of what would need to be levied in order to complete the projects, whether it be the 9-year versus the 20-year timeframe. And again, we've also identified an estimated amount of what that would look like from a property tax standpoint, with examples of 200, 300, and 400,000 if levied annually there. And I'll note, just as noted in the slide, it's just for illustration purposes, it's depicted in what that amount would look like to the homes, taxpayers, but it could vary a little bit from year to year in terms of how the levy would be applied. But this looks at what what's estimated to accomplish that. And then again, I've just, for informational purposes, highlighted the stadium portion of the project only. And it's just interesting to see how that the 9-year versus the 20-year and what that difference can be in those different approaches. So I think I'll stop here and would love just to get some initial feedback on the list. And again, we recognize there may be more projects than desired. There may be fewer projects than desired, but we hope that as a starting point, the list will be helpful to the board and future decision making.
Commissioner Kearns, do you have any comments?
I guess one thing that kind of went through my mind as we were going through this, I mean, as we're seeing inflation get worse kind of every month, how confident are you on the cost of each of these projects? And say we're 16, 18 months down the road and the costs have escalated, we've bonded for a certain dollar amount. Do the parks projects lose their funding for Avista Stadium, or does Avista Stadium lose their funding for the parks projects to go through? I mean, we're in kind of unprecedented times as far as cost escalations and construction and materials and labor. I think that's something that could absolutely happen a year and a half from now.
Right. No,
how do you think we would address that?
Sure. No, great question, and very, very true. The construction climate has been very challenging, and unlike certainly what I've experienced in my lifetime. I would say that we can address that in a number of ways. One could be a prioritization of the projects and a clear, basically outlining, or the board would decide and direct, if you will, how we would prioritize these. Would the stadium be the top priority? or are there certain elements that would not be included if costs exceeded projections, if you would? And I think in the case of the stadium, we could identify those projects that would be prioritized and the first covered, and be very upfront in identifying those that would not be completed if for any reason the construction costs ended up exceeding funds available. The same could be applied to the park projects. We could either prioritize by project, or there could be certain elements within those projects that could be looked at. And we could basically, again, those are a few different examples of how we might approach that. But I think there are certainly additional options that could be looked at depending upon the priority and how we outline that.
Okay, thank you.
Well, and I guess to speak to that too a little bit, I mean, we still have our REIT 2 funding that can go to these projects. So if we, need additional funding for some of the parks projects, the REIT 2 would be available as well. Correct, Doug? Because a lot of these projects you were anticipating maybe trying to look at some of those REIT dollars, but we were going to try to, borrow against it.
Yes. Yeah, there definitely is some overlap within our capital plan for several of these projects, but there also are several projects in that capital plan that are not included here. I think another part of that cushion, if you will, in looking at those future cost escalation is that criteria where, as you know, we very much enjoy pursuing grant funds and leveraging additional grant dollars. And I think the thought is those dollars also could be very helpful if the costs end up escalating beyond the initial estimates, which we've tried to be conservative. But definitely, we do have our capital improvement plan and some REIT dollars that could be helpful and part of that equation as well.
I guess just some initial thoughts for me, just being that CPA, looking at, the levy lid lift versus the bond, just the amount of money that's going out in interest is interesting how, to look at that and see how much, how much money is going out in interest over the course of the 20 years, which I just hadn't even anticipated. So that's interesting to me. Versus the 9 years going to be, more expensive in a short term for individuals. So, just lots of things to think about from that perspective for me. On the list of projects themselves, I had just kept hearing, I thought I had mentioned this, when we met the last time, that there's just a lot of conversation out there on needing additional youth sports fields. So did you guys look at that or talk about that? I don't know if that's part of what your thoughts are for the $1 million out on the West Plains. But I just keep hearing from people that there's just not enough youth sports fields out there for us. So I guess I was anticipating that maybe we were going to see some of that. Can you speak to that a little bit, Doug, as you guys thought?
Sure. Yeah, for the county, we definitely have, we have long identified the need to make some renovations and improvements there at plants. When we've done and studied that, what we've learned is the field lighting can in some cases effectively double the use of existing fields. And so the lighting of 6 fields at Plants Ferry, the field lighting identified for yet to be determined locations, very likely of regional significance for other parks, that speaks to that desire to address that need for additional field time. And in this case, it would do so by enhancing and maximizing the use of existing facilities as opposed to investing in constructing new and additional fields. We really see potential through our studying and review to maximize and enhance what we have as the most effective and cost-effective means of addressing those needs. And so that was that's a big part of the direction that we've gone here with the recommendations.
Okay, thank you. And as you looked at that, I'm sure you have, because I think we've talked about this, looking at, dark sky lighting and
Yes.
those things. I know Ridgeline High School, when they put in their new high school, that's some of the stuff. I haven't heard any comments from people out there yet, but that'd be interesting to see what's been said out there, because I know they were trying to use kind of the latest technology and dark sky lighting techniques to.
Yes. Yeah, we have the dark sky LED literally written into some of the agreement work and such that we've done with Plants Ferry, for example. So that does seem to be the latest and greatest technology and minimizes that impact to the surrounding area when compared to other older types of lighting.
Okay, yeah, the light pollution, I think, is kind of the terms that people use too. So, okay. Any other questions for Doug and the team at this point?
And I think I have one more slide, if not. Oh, thank you, Ken. All right, and just kind of looking ahead, and again, we recognize today is really our first opportunity to present the recommendation or suggestion for the board in that timeline, and anticipate that there, of course, will be additional discussion. We'd like to provide you opportunity and time to consider what we've provided. And so looking ahead, perhaps to a next meeting sometime in April, we've just identified a few potential decision points or other items to discuss in more depth. So we're always trying to look ahead at what those next steps may be. And so just kind of throw that out there for consideration as we look at scheduling that next meeting, if desired by the board, to continue on the path of discussion.
Yeah, I know for me, we definitely want to continue, like give us, a little bit of time and maybe have you, reach out to Commissioner French and make sure he gets his presentation before that next meeting. So that way we all can come to the next meeting, having thought through some of the ramifications of this and move forward. But I feel you did a great job with the list. Thank you for, helping, educate me on why, no additional fields, that you're using existing fields and adding lighting to it to provide more time for those fields to be able to be used. So thank you for that. Commissioner Kearns, any other questions? And then I'll go to Chris.
No, I don't have any more questions.
Okay. Chris.
Perfect. Thank you, Commissioner. I just want to take a couple of minutes too to say thank you to Garrett, Eric, Doug. I know you guys have put quite a bit of time into this, and it was not an easy task to get all of these projects in one spot by March 28th. So thank you for that work. I know a lot went into it. Also, just want to reiterate from the Indians' perspective, I think we're a strong proponent of the levy lift option. I just think it's a better use of taxpayers' dollars too. That spreadsheet that Doug put together really kind of tells the story for me. So, I encourage us to go down that path if at all possible. And then also wanted to update this group as well that we have the Indians have engaged in with a firm to do some polling as well. So once we do get this project list complete and to a point where we're comfortable, the Indians have a group in place and are willing to take on that task and also the cost as well, just to get a sense of how these projects may land from a public perspective. We'd much rather have that information going into a potential ballot measure than find out, after a vote. So just wanted to let you guys know that and answer any questions that you guys may have from an Indians point of view as well.
Great. Thank you. So I guess, so our next deadline is, if we're going to put something on the ballot, it has to be May 13th for the August ballot. So we just don't have a lot of time here, which I think we knew. So do we want to plan to come back, that first week of April That way everyone has a chance to kind of think through the list and see if there's any other comments or questions. With Commissioner French not here today, I just don't want to make, I would like him to be aware and part of that conversation. So Scott, thoughts?
Yeah, we could certainly queue this up for your next meeting is April 11th, if I'm not mistaken on my dates, the second weekend in April. So we could have Doug ready to go with this particular slide here, run back through the information for questions, and so that gives us a full kind of month, if you will, to prepare for a potential ballot measure.
Yeah. I think the 11th or the 12th, I mean, it can be Tuesday as well if we need to do after the consent agenda. Just knowing the 11th seems to be, there's a lot of people wanting to get on the 11th schedule too already, so.
And I know there's some outstanding items on the Avista Stadium with the Indians regarding the design work and the sharing of the costs there, as well as the Indians' anticipated contribution and how that could be framed in terms of capital versus restructuring the lease agreement. So there's also some decision points on that. I know timing is pretty important to start advancing that in preparing for some eventual construction of improvements out of this stadium.
So yeah, so I think let's definitely schedule that then for next, when we're back, and make sure we have plenty of time to kind of go through all of that. So thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate everyone's time today. Chris, I know Garrett and Eric for joining us as well, for this conversation. So I don't know if Garrett or Eric have any comments that they'd like to add. But I do want to say thank you all for participating. We really appreciate it. So Garrett, I see you have taken your video. You're good. Okay.
I would just say it's been a pleasure. I think, through our partnership and success with Conservation Futures and acquiring lands, it's a great opportunity. I've always said it, the citizen doesn't realize, or in some cases care about where the boundaries are. They live in this region for a reason. And a lot of that, I think, is around with the beautiful physical parks and recreation assets that we have. So it's always a pleasure to partner up with Doug and Scott and staff. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Real quick comment. I just want to compliment Doug and his team for helping guide through this process. There's a lot of information that we had to go through pretty quickly, and they put it together in a great way so we could understand it. So I felt like I'm confidently making a good decision to help you guys move this forward. So well done, Doug.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And I appreciate you guys taking the time too, because I know it was pretty quick and you guys had to meet quite a bit to help us and guide us. So thank you both very much. And Doug, of course, to you and your team. I see Paul Knowles is on. Fabulous job and just getting the information quickly to us. And so I just want to say thank you all very much.
Thank you. We appreciate the opportunity, and we'll look forward to visiting more in April.
Yeah, sounds great. Okay, thank you all. Okay. Get back to our agenda now. Next is miscellaneous items. So Scott, I'm going to let you kind of take over the miscellaneous items list.
Okay, thanks, Commissioner. There's a couple things today. The commissioners had received a request a few weeks ago for a facility improvement named Northeast Spokane Community Behavioral Health Clinic. This is, if I have my data recollected here, this is a request for rehabbing or refurbishing the former Hilliard Library in the city of Spokane. There's a group of folks in the community who would like to convert that over to a behavioral health clinic. They're trying to identify some capital needs and support for it. One of the requests that had come to the commissioners was for $300,000 in supporting the capital facility request. The commissioners had asked us to take a look and see what funding might be available via our 1/10 mental health sales tax and the eligibility to use that for such a purpose. And we do have in this year's budget some monies that hadn't been specifically identified for uses that could be utilized and seem to fit into excuse me, the eligible use of that 1/10. So there is sufficient dollars in the current budget to be able to cover the 300 if that's the direction and support by the commissioners. We don't have it up for action right now, just more of an update as a follow-up to that request.
Thank you. I guess, I know, I think initially they came asking for ARP, but I think it's a use for us, the mental health 1/10 money that is for the community that I don't see why we couldn't use that. And that way, then there's not the audit issues with the ARP and, all the red tape that we know is going along with the RFP. I think then it just helps to, take care of that gap funding that they have. So I'm okay moving forward with it with the 1/10 money. Josh, I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great project, and I think it's a great use of the mental health sales tax. So I would support us moving forward and funding that that project out of that fund as opposed to ARP for exactly the same reasons Commissioner Cuny stated.
Okay, well, we will move forward on that request and getting an action in front of the commissioners for you to support the ask and the use of the 1/10.
Yeah, I guess, and just to clarify, Scott, or to let citizens know that it's because what they're doing is they're rehabbing it for mental health purposes. So it's going to become a mental health clinic. And so that's why it's a allowable use for those 1/10 monies.
Exactly. Okay, next I was going to have Jared give an update on one of our favorite topics, the hearing room improvements that are being worked on.
Thank you. Make it quick and positive. Last week, the contractor got the Zoom functionality working up on the big screen. So we're rocking and rolling there. This week is, I'm just reading his email, finishing programming, which will be done by the end of the week. Then we need to do some quick testing, and it should be ready to use. No problems for April 11th. I mean, everything looks good. It looks like there's some issues they're figuring out with some of the computers. I think what had happened is they set up the Zoom functionality for the podium computer, when in reality we want the clerk to be operating that. So just a few minor things, but everything looks good. Like we're going to be able to at least give it a good dry run on April 11th.
Okay. Awesome. I know the commissioners had chartered us with being ready to host meetings in person again by the week of April 11th. So it sounds like we're on track to be able to do that. A couple of kind of housekeeping logistics items. Originally, the DC fly-in was tentatively scheduled for the week of May 2nd. And so the commissioners had opted not to have meetings that week. We now know that the DC fly-in is going to be the week of June 6th. So I wanted to see if you wanted to switch those dates for your meetings and have meetings the week of May 2nd and then cancel the meetings for the week of June 6th.
I would agree to that, because I think that was the intent, was that we were going to be at the DC fly-in, and now that it's changed, I'm happy to just flip those weeks.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Okay, we'll have Gina update those dates on your calendars. And then the following item is just a discussion on, Mark, do you have something? Yeah.
Thank you. After you get done with that, I just wanted to remind the commissioners that there's that new House Bill 1329 that I assume might come into play with the discussion of the 5:30 public hearing. So I don't know, we're queuing that up for discussion, I think in 2 weeks for you.
It's a great segue, Mark. So one of the things that the commissioners had been incorporating into the 2 o'clock meetings is the legislative actions on public hearings. And we took a look back at last couple of years and seeing how frequently those public hearings were held. And that were traditionally at the 5:30. Gina went back and looked, and I'm going to go off of just kind of some memory here, but it appeared that individual instances, if you held those previously twice a month prior to the COVID, and more often than not, there were public hearings that were held on those times. I want to say in the 16 to 21 individual days of that. So just wanted to cue that up also for the commissioners to determine if that's still something that you want to continue incorporating to 2 o'clock. If you wanted to start having the those public hearings at the 5:30. Again, just kind of a conversation starting right now, and you guys can all give us some feedback as to which direction you'd like us to go as far as agenda setting and reestablishing what that pace is going to be.
Can I ask you to repeat that, Scott? You said, so we would schedule them twice a month, so roughly 24 scheduled a year. How many are you saying we actually held?
Gina can correct me, but I believe it was between 16 and 21. We looked back, I think as far back as 18. Does that sound right, Gina?
Yes, that is correct.
Is that what you recall, Commissioner Cuny?
I know. I asked Scott to look into it because I just didn't think we had them all that often.
No, I didn't think we did it. I thought we ended up canceling them more often than not because we didn't have agenda items that required a public hearing. I am shocked that we held them that often. It just doesn't seem that way.
Yeah.
Ron's saying we all have COVID fog. all of us except Gina, I guess.
Well,
I don't remember us having them that often. That's not what I recall. But
yeah, and obviously, for the last 2 years, we've been doing it at the 2 o'clock meetings during the day. So I mean, I think it's definitely worth looking at because I know some counties have just gone to the daytime ones, others have not, as I've talked to other commissioners. But I think Mark's correct in that we need to look at this new bill and how that's going to affect what we do and how we do it. Is it 1359, Mark?
1329.
Okay, sorry, 1329. I knew it was close. So, because I know that has some immediate ramifications once the governor signs it. Is that correct? Versus waiting?
Yes, there are some immediate ramifications. We're complying with that now. There'll be some that come in with signing day.
Okay. So you're planning to give a presentation then when we come back in April?
That's right. And there'll be some policy choices you'll want to make then.
Okay. Sounds good. And if there's some information that you have ahead of that, that you can send out to the commissioners, that'd be great too, before we talk about it. Because I know that's being talked about. I know when I talked to WASAC, they're looking at MRCs. They're hoping that they're going to get something out here quickly as well on that. So I don't know if they have yet or not. Have they, Mark?
MRSC did send something out, but I don't recall if we've incorporated into our thoughts yet.
Okay. Yeah. So anyway, I think before we, start scheduling every other or, twice a month public hearings, I think we need to see what is being said with that new bill.
Sounds right. Thank you.
So I'd say at this point in time, at least for the month of April, we'll continue with the 2 o'clocks and then, see what happens with Mark's presentation to us. And so then we can decide what we need to move forward with from there. And I want to ensure that we've got, Commissioner French, all three commissioners listening, and making that decision together. So one of the questions with the public hearing, so, again, it's, and Mark, as long as you're still on too, making sure that if we have a meeting in our conference room and we have more, so like on Monday, the 11th, I'm anticipating that we'll be meeting in our conference room. And if we have more people show up than the room holds or we're comfortable with, then the hearing room is available for us to move to continue the meeting. Because what I don't want to do is cancel the meeting. That's been part of the thought process, not having, why we don't have the board of hearing room available at this point in time, which has been different than what the city council chambers for the city of the valley, they've all had their chambers fully accessible to them. We haven't had an alternative spot. So I just want to be clear that Monday, the 11th, we'll continue to meet in the conference room, but the hearing room will be available if we need to go in there. And then the 2 o'clock meeting, since we are going to have a public hearing on the precinct boundary changes, that we will have that 2 o'clock meeting in the hearing room. Does that sound acceptable to everybody and meets all our needs?
That's certainly my understanding, Commissioner, and I think that will work. I think we're just waiting for Jared to make sure that hearing room's ready to go, and I think he's saying it is, so I think we'll be okay.
Okay. Okay, and I don't, just so Gina can make sure that it's published, where the meetings are anticipated to take place too, since, this is, we got today and tomorrow before we break for, our vacation week.
And Commissioner Cuny, Gina's been looking, we've been looking at the conference room, cleared out a few things in there, make sure that we can have good spacing for those at the conference table, good spacing for those who may be wishing to be in person and observe. So we'll have a pretty good sense of how many that'll handle.
Great, thank you. Scott, do you have any other miscellaneous items? I have one.
Nope, that gets my list.
Okay. I did, at the end of last week, get an email from Senator Andy Billig saying that he was offering to visit with the Board of County Commissioners if we would like to provide a legislative wrap up and answer questions if we would like. He says we don't need to do it, but if we would like him to come, he is happy to. So Commissioner Kearns, would you like to have Senator Billig come and give us a legislative wrap up and answer any questions, or are you good?
I'm good either way.
I'm kind of good either way too. So, I mean, I think we kind of know how the legislation wrapped up. So,
I mean, did he indicate, is there any specific pieces of legislation he wants us to discuss or something? I mean, nope. We've never been offered this before. So.
Nope, we have not. And he said, there was no need, if we didn't need him to come, he was happy not to. I think he's kind of offering this up to anyone. And so he sent the email to me as chair and just said, if we would like him to come, he's happy to.
I will allow the chair to decide how she would like to set her agenda.
Okay, I will look at that and have a conversation and think about it. I may talk to Mike Burgess as well and make that determination then. Okay, perfect. I think that's all that I had. Do you have any miscellaneous, Commissioner Kearns?
I do not.
Okay. Okay, then that will take us to Ashley Cameron. It looks like we have a executive session. Is there any, are you anticipating us to make any decisions after we come out?
No, I am not. Okay.
So then we will be going into executive session to discuss labor negotiations. The RCW is 42.140 bracket 4. You expect 10 minutes, is that correct?
That's correct.
And who do you anticipate to be in the meeting?
The commissioners, executive team, and Mark McLean and myself.
Okay. So we will then, is it 11:12?
Yes.
Just making sure I'm on the right time zone here. 11:12, so we will go into executive session for 10 minutes. When we come out of executive session, we will adjourn for the day, so we will not be coming back into regular session. And then we will see everybody tomorrow at 2 o'clock for our 2 o'clock Tuesday, March 29th consent agenda. And if we do extend, we will let the clerk know so she can note that for the record. Thank you, and we will go into executive session and see everybody else tomorrow at 2 o'clock.